Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I apologize. Apparently Goldsboroughs are never on time, including my ancestor who missed signing the Declaration of Independence but 3 times. And thank you so much, Peggy, and thank you so much to the Talbot Historical Society and the Talbot County Free Library for having us all here. I started my Goldsborough research when I was about 12 years old. I had received this family tree, which we can all look at afterwards, from my aunt, and I was engrossed with who are these people, why are they here, where did they come from, what are their stories. And my journey, so since that time, took me to England, to Yorkshire to study where the family came from, and then here, of course, to Easton, and traveling to the different homes and plantations. It was a joy to see Pleasant Valley and Myrtle Grove on that trip, which I saw in 2005. I don't have a PhD, just to make that clear, but I've studied for over 20 years now with the family, and have, I think, well documented the research that's available today. From George A. Hanson's Old Kent, the Eastern Shore of Maryland, first published in Baltimore in 1876, quote, Nicholas Goldsborough, the progenitor of the Goldsborough family of Maryland, was born in 1640 at Malcolm Regis, near Weymouth, in the county of Dorset, England. He married in 1659 Margaret Howes. They had 3 children, Robert, Nicholas, and Judith. Nicholas Goldsborough left England in 1669 and went to Barbados, thence to New England, and finally, in early 1670, settled on Kent Island, where he died and was buried on the plantation of Tobias Wells. The Goldsborough family tree runs deep into the foundation of Maryland as a colony and as a mid-Atlantic state. Its long branches are deeply intertwined with the Eastern Shore's political and agricultural history. Today, we discuss historical figures of this family, their vast plantations, and the fine decorative arts that fill them. I dedicate this lecture to my late mother, Sarah, whose grandmother was a Goldsborough. My favorite portrait by colonial artist Charles Wilson Peale is that of William Goldsborough. It hangs prominently at Annapolis's Hammond Howard House. Painted between 1789 and 1790, the portrait captures William in relative youth, age 40. Coincidentally, Peale also worked on Judge Robert Goldsborough's renowned family portrait at Myrtle Grove, which we will visit later. The son of Robert Goldsborough II and Mary Ann Turbot Robbins, William was born at Myrtle Grove and was half-brother to Judge Robert Goldsborough. Coined Uncle Billy of the Halens, William never married and was devoted to agriculture and life at his family's plantation. Detailed accounts of quotidian affairs are documented by William in a farm journal written in the 1780s. He was moved by deaths in the family, as is noted in entries from 1789 to 1788. End quote. 1787, Tuesday, at 7 o'clock this morning, Mrs. R. Goldsborough of Dorset died at my brother Hal's Goldsborough's house. End quote. And again, December 1788. I heard of my cousin Robert Goldsborough's death, a gentleman respected by all good men, end quote. And later, quote, Friday 26, cloudy morning and not cold. My worthy friend, Mr. Goldsborough, is interred at the churchyard of Cambridge. None of his relations north of the Choptank were at his funeral, the river being frozen, except my brother Hal's and his family, end quote. In 1789, Charles Wilson Peale left Philadelphia, and in November had arrived on Maryland's eastern shore. Peale's journal states that he was paid 10 guineas for William's portrait. On November 30th, Peale writes, quote, make my frame and prepare the canvas, end quote. And again on January 12, 1790, quote, finished at Mr. Goldsborough's, having painted Mr. William Goldsborough in half-length size, received money for the business annually. Field's painting of William defines a gentleman farmer, a calm gaze, a slight smile, the fine quality of his buttoned, butter-yellow waistcoat, and the ease with which the sitter reclines are all signifiers of a confidently comfortable background. In his hand, it's all too easy to imagine William's trusted journal of births and deaths. Almost as alluring as the sitter's gaze is the period side chair he sits on, the warm mahogany illuminated by Field's brushstroke. Quite miraculously, this Chippendale-style side chair and portrait descended in the family and were donated together. Made circa 1775, the chair may have been owned or acquired by William directly. But as Field mentions painting William and his brother's portraits during visits to Myrtle Grove, the chair may have been lent by Judge Goldsborough for William's portrait. A similar armchair is featured in William's brother's large family painting. Master furniture designer Thomas Chippendale came from Otley, Yorkshire, in England, his father having been involved with the timber trade. In 1754, he published The Gentleman and the Cabinet Maker's Directory, featuring 160 furniture designs, a catalyst for fashionable seating furniture in 18th century England. Styles of Chippendale chairs were diminished and interpreted by carpenters in the American colonies. Another chair with Goldsborough provenance sits at the Museum of Early Southern Decorative Arts, also called the acronym MESDA. Dating from 1725 to 1750, this rush-bottom armchair reportedly descends from the Goldsboroughs of Talbot Plantation in Easton, Maryland. Trade between the Dutch and the English was prevalent in Talbot County during the 18th century, largely in part thanks to 600 miles of tidal shoreline, making it the largest coastal topography in the United States. Decorative influences seen in 17th and 18th century colonial furniture stem from the prolific trade between tobacco planters and the Dutch and English merchants. The many stylistic elements of the Goldsborough armchair, such as its turned front rungs, flat swan arms, and an ogee-shaped resting rail, can trace their origins to English, Dutch, and even French armchair prototypes. A Mesda Summer Institute essay by Steve Golden argues that the chair could have originally been painted red, and that as the rush seat follows the paint sequence of the rest of the chair, the seat could be original, making this rush seat a rare survival among mid-Atlantic colonial furniture. Otwell Plantation is one of the earliest recorded dwellings in Talbot County. Situated on a peninsula bordered by Goldsborough Creek and Tribe Creek, the farm's earliest recorded survey stems from 1659 and comprises 500 acres. In the early 1700s, Otwell was bequeathed to Foster Turpin, who was a clerk in Talbot County. When Foster died in 1720, the house passed to his daughter Sarah, who married Nicholas Goldsborough III. From 1721, Nicholas and Sarah added enhancements to the original 16th century dwelling. The couple changed the axis of the 1.5 story house, adding the tail end of what would be an unusually sophisticated T-shaped floor plan. The interiors boast 2 parlors at the cross of the T, with a dining room at the stem. Most notable was a magnificent stair hall and staircase, which had tulip-carved step-ends. A fire in 1958 regrettably took most of the original details of Otwell. A probate inventory from 1769 for Nicholas's will lists rush-bottom chairs among his inventory, specifically 1 armchair. Several scholars agree that Nicholas and Sarah Goldsborough were monetarily affluent and socially prominent while at Otwell, and as such, it seems fitting that this fine quality Mesda armchair descends from this house. Of the documented furniture owned by the Goldsborough family, there is one piece that is the most magnificent to appear in recent years. In 2023, an exceptionally rare and fine Maryland inlaid mahogany secretary bookcase came to auction in North Carolina. The secretary, made of mahogany, satinwood, and yellow pine, stands over 8 feet tall and is, quote, among the most commanding examples of neoclassical cabinet work from the 18th century Chesapeake, end quote. Iconography, provenance, and family lore relate the secretary bookcase to the branch of Maryland Governor Charles Goldsborough III. Governor Charles managed 2 prosperous marriages in his lifetime. First, to his cousin Elizabeth, daughter of Judge Robert Goldsborough of Murfreesboro. They married in 1793, and historians believe this secretary bookcase may have been a wedding present commissioned for them. When Elizabeth died in 1798 at the tender age of 22, Charles Goldsborough married for a second time to another cousin, Sarah Yerbury Goldsborough. Through this marriage, Charles gained access to the famed Goldsborough plantation of Sarah's father, called Horns Point, today the University of Maryland's Horn Point Laboratory. Reportedly, it is at Horns Point that this secretary bookcase resided and descended from the 1790s through to the 1930s. Charles Goldsborough was elected governor for the Federalist Party in January of 1819. He would be the last governor of that party. The Goldsborough administration was a brief one, ending in the fall of that year. Charles had been educated at the University of Pennsylvania, first for a Bachelor of Arts in 1784, followed by a master's and law degree in 1790. On the Pennsylvania State Seal is displayed a ship, plow, and sheaves of wheat. And on Charles Goldsborough's secretary bookcase, we see the same emblems of a 3-sail ship and a wheat shift plinth inlaid in yellow pine at each corner of that elaborate scrolling head. The strong ties that Governor Goldsborough had to the University of Pennsylvania further support his relation to the secretary bookcase. In a 1954 publication for National Geographic magazine titled Roving Maryland's Cavalier County, William Kenny writes, quote, "Manors and plantations with private wharfs became the rule. There, ships discharged cargoes from abroad and picked up gold and tobacco. Some estates even had their own deep water merchantmen. All had their small boats for visiting around." End quote. One such estate, situated on the junction of Goldsborough Creek and the Miles River, is Myrtle Grove. Located down a long road lined with ancient cedar trees, Myrtle Grove is an evocative federal structure. It is possibly the family's finest plantation house still in existence today. In the 18th century, a nearly 3-mile-long tract was carved out of Robert Goldsborough I's Ashby estate and may have been presented to his son as a wedding present. Here is where Robert II built the oldest section of the house, a 1 1/2 story structure erected circa 1734. The exterior is clad with beaded weatherboard, while at the back a porch with 6 wooden pillars support a sloping wood shingled gable roof. The interior of this section of Myrtle Grove boasts period floor to ceiling paneling. In this image, a portrait of an early Goldsborough, Judge William Goldsborough, hangs in a sitting room. The 1790 section of the house was completed by Robert II's son, Judge Robert Goldsborough III, and added to the southeast end of the original home. A miniature portrait in watercolor on ivory, painted by James Peel, brother of Charles Wilson Peel, depicts Judge Robert. Housed at the Yale University Art Gallery, the miniature is dated to 1790, with an inscription RG to the reverse. Judge Goldsborough spared no expense when expanding his home. Bricks were fashioned on site, though family lore claims they were imported from England. Laid in the Flemish bond pattern, the addition boasts a 2-story tall structure on a raised basement. Standing 4 bays wide and 3 bays deep, the house seems pierced with ample sunlight, each of its many windows flanked by imposing 3-paneled or louvered shutters. The front entry door is framed with fluted pilasters beneath a delicate fanlight encased by a grand triangular pediment. Opening to an entry hall, the telescope layout allows a visitor to see straight through out the river door. On the interior, fine sitting rooms retain the original ceiling cornices, carved with eagles, horn sheaves, and tobacco leaves. Historian Don Swan Jr. noted in 1939, quote, "A chair rail and an ornate plaster molding, and hangings in red damask and gold bring back the past so vividly that a motor car glimpsed through the window seems out of place," end quote. Of the furniture commissioned for Myrtle Grove in the 18th century is the federal mahogany sideboard attributed to cabinet maker John Shaw of Annapolis, circa 1790. The estimated creation date suggests that Judge Goldsborough may have ordered the sideboard to outfit his new wing. During the completion of Myrtle Grove's addition, another important piece of Goldsboro material culture was executed. Famed colonial portrait artist Charles Wilson Peale was commissioned to paint a family group portrait of Judge Goldsborough, his wife, and 2 children. Peale has been called the American Michelangelo, perhaps for his longevity, self-motivation, and for applying artistic talents across a range of vocations. Such talents included saddle maker, silversmith, watchmaker, portrait and landscape painter, sculptor, and museum curator. Between 1767 and 1793, Charles Wilson Peale was entirely engrossed in the art of portraiture. A strategy that led to his financial success, Peale sought to bring taste and a sense of dynasty to his American colonial clients. In the late 1760s, Peale studied the works of Benjamin West and Joshua Reynolds in London, and came away emulating the British aristocratic portraiture techniques used for depicting wealthy English patrons. Lorinda Goodwin notes, when discussing colonial portrait artists, quote, "A balance of luxury goods with the taste and knowledge of their uses was essential, and painters who worked successfully in elite circles were familiar of this air and how to convey it," end quote. In November of 1789, Peale arrived at Myrtle Grove to dine with Myrtle Grove's master, Judge Robert Goldsborough III. A deal was struck, and his paintbrush hit the canvas. What ensued is the neoclassical force of tranquil reserve and stately demeanor rare among colonial family portraits. To the right, resting gracefully on a mahogany armchair, possibly from the same suite as the chair at Hammond Harwood House, sits Judge Robert. Judge Goldsborough was a lawyer and prominent figure in his community. He became a judge from Maryland's General Court and served from 1784 to 1798. His son and heir, Robert Henry Goldsborough, stands at an intimate distance, his left arm resting on his father's shoulder, his languid gaze directed straight at the viewer. Mary Emerson Tripp married Judge Goldsborough in 1768. She is posed here in 3/4 profile view, her teal-colored satin dress casting shadows in its folds. At far left, her daughter, Elizabeth Greenberry Goldsborough, gestures with a florilegium in her hands, myrtle possibly among it. While the faces, and in particular the hands, of this painting are masterfully rendered, they are not the most intriguing part of this arrangement. Off to the far right, in profile view, we see the inclusion of a portrait bust of His Excellency George Washington. Sculpted in wood by Peale himself, this portrait is one of the few pictorial references in existence of this bust of Washington, as the object itself does not survive. According to the executive director of collections at Mount Vernon, Adam Irby, quote, "Peale was one of 4 people to sculpt Washington from life," end quote. The bust may have been added while the artist was visiting the family to retouch the painting in 1791. Through my own genealogical research, I have discovered distinct blood and marriage relations linking the Goldsboroughs to President Washington. Judge Goldsborough reportedly acquired a portrait of Washington by Charles Wilson Peale during this commission. Washington's portrait bust in the Goldsborough portrait is a device used to both highlight the family's patriotism and their dynastic familial connection to America's most important figure. This is personally my favorite slide. We have my cousin, Mrs. Goldsborough. Is it Mrs. Henry looking down at me in front of the same painting, but different years. Paintings and mahogany furniture were not the only decorative arts to grace Goldsborough interiors. Between the first and third quarters of the 19th century, 3 services of Chinese export armorial porcelain were ordered. Made by skilled Chinese artisans in southern China, porcelains were traded between East Asia and Europe since the 14th century. In the late 17th century, the English and the Dutch gained regular access to coveted trading routes with China. In the 18th century, a passage of China's Pearl River became a dominant sea route. Sailing through the Tiger's Mouth, also called Boca Tigres, European and American ships would head upriver to Canton, today the city of Guangzhou. At Canton Port, Western merchant ships were met with gateways that, once off the beach, led them to a series of factories which were rented to foreigners. Flags that delineate foreign trade posts from America, England, Spain, and Denmark are readily spotted in Chinese export paintings from the time. American trade with Canton prospered significantly in the decades following the Revolution. In the years leading up to the War of 1812, there were over 40 ships arriving from America annually. American interest in Chinese export porcelain grew alongside the necessity for taste and to combat the expense of European porcelain manufacturers. To paraphrase scholar Jean McClure-Mudge, quote, "Porcelain was a personal product. Whether made in gross amounts or on private order, the Chinaware belonged to someone. This was true also of tea and textiles, but they lacked the individuality of a porcelain piece with its special form or decoration, which announced its uniqueness and at the same time enhanced the position of its owner." End quote. Nothing defines social status as acutely as an individual's coat of arms. Commissioning memorials on Chinese porcelain was a concept quickly adopted by newly founded American gentry. 18th century Chinese artists replicated the various sizes of shapes of plates from either silver dishes or woodblock forms sent from Europe. Developing an overglaze technique allowed a Chinese artisan to use polychrome enamels to highlight various elements of complex heraldic devices. Such porcelains proceeded through a second round of kiln firing at low temperatures. If gilt decoration was used, then a third round of firing ensued. An early style of Chinese export porcelain decoration was the Fitzhugh pattern, which may have first been used in 1780. An extensive and important armorial export service done in the Fitzhugh pattern was commissioned by a Maryland Goldsborough in 1815, each piece depicting the central coat of arms of Goldsborough. The service was rendered in a dramatic sepia tone with shades of brown painted on white ground. Surrounding each shield are clusters of Chinese peony and scholars' utensils, further decorated with flower sprigs and cash medallions on a trellised border. To understand the importance of this service, we look to another commission made in or around 1820. The Manillot service of Charles Isard Manillot is highly sought after by museums and collectors alike. Recently, items from this service came up for auction in North Carolina. A shell-formed shrimp platter and a serving plate sold in 2023 for $34,000 and $32,000 respectively. The Goldsborough, I may never be able to afford a Goldsborough plate, the Goldsborough Fitzhugh service is scarce today. A recent image of an existing plate in a private collection illuminates the object in 21st century light. To the far right of this interior vignette is a plate from our second service, commissioned around 1810. Produced in the Mandarin palette, the central motifs feature various Chinese courtly figures at leisure in palace gardens and terraces. Painted in vibrant colors, the border, known as the Goldsboro border, is unique in its lappets of foaming turquoise waves outlined by gilt dragons beneath magenta trellis cartouches. Again, the Goldsboro coat of arms, painted in sepia, with a pink motto ribbon pressed to the top of each plate. The question remains, who in the Goldsboro family commissioned these services? According to export porcelain scholar David Sanctuary Howard, these two services probably descended in the line of our earlier mentioned Governor Charles Goldsboro, or that of his son, Senator William Tillman Goldsboro. But research from the Secretary bookcase shows financial distress in this line of the family.
From what we know thus far, these Chinese porcelain services could very well have descended in either the Horns Point, Myrtle Grove, or Otwell lines of affluent Goldsboroughs. The answer lies in the wills pertaining to these families, and more research needs to be completed on the topic. Finally, one last armorial dish from 1860 shows the Goldsboro coat of arms truer to form than its sepia cousins. Crozier's General Armory, a registry of American families entitled to coat armor, was published in New York in 1904. Here it lists the Goldsboro shield as, quote, azure, a cross fleury argent, end quote. Coat of arms etched into a sterling silver service commissioned by my grandfather display the same exact pictorial reference passed down for several centuries. The Pennington Goldsboro Export Service displays the finely detailed arms of Goldsboro impaling those of Pennington at the center, surrounded by an elaborate famille rose and gilt decoration of cartouches displaying chrysanthemum, magpie, and courtly figures at leisure. Most certainly ordered by Union Naval Officer John R. Goldsboro and his wife Mary Lawrence Pennington, the present dish is the only one known to exist from this service.
While discussing the intriguing and visually stimulating decorative arts of the Goldsboro family, it would be remiss of me not to remind us that the fortunes which afforded these luxury goods were amassed at the sorrowful expense of enslaved individuals. The Eastern Shore retained natural fertile grounds perfect for growing tobacco and wheat grain, as both these goods could be imported. Turnover on Maryland plantations relied heavily on slave labor. Maryland state documents pertaining to Judge Robert Goldsboro state that in 1776, Myrtle Grove had 24 slaves. In 1783, there were 46 slaves valued, and in 1790, there were 41 enslaved people. To reference research by Dr. Sean Wallace, in 1798, Senator Robert Henry Goldsboro paid for a 5-year subscription to the Maryland Herald and Eastern Shore Intelligencer to advertise for runaway enslaved people.
One such Goldsboro-related advertisement, known as a broadside, appeared on the auction market in 2023. Broadsides were one-sided pages affixed in public areas that serve as announcements, in this case pertaining to enslaved people, for sale or escapees. This document relates to the will of Nicholas Goldsboro VI of Otwell, who died in 1857. Dated to 1858, the broadside offers the sum of, quote, $1,200 reward, or $200 for each adult, for the return of 7 self-emancipated formerly enslaved individuals: Alan Davidson, about age 28, Scylla or Priscilla, about 30 to 35 years of age, with an infant, about 6 or 8 months old, twin brothers, Bob and Harry Davidson, 20 years old, Boris Davidson, 18 years old, Charles Davidson, 15 or 16 years old, end quote.
Governor Charles Goldsboro is also not untarnished. In 1830, a federal census lists 116 enslaved people, men, women, and young children, on the plantation he retired, called Shoal Creek. We carried with us a deep acknowledgement of Maryland's involvement in America's slave trade, and for the inhumane suffering of thousands. Vestiges, such as the Goldsboro broadside, left over from an unwarranted and irreligious era are here to remind us. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for Blake?
Initially, why did Nicholas Goldsborough come to Maryland? And how was given the land?
Well, I was in England myself researching where he came from in Dorset. And there's nothing that says particularly what his reasons were, but I imagine he had some money descended from the family. And like many Protestant individuals at that time, there was more land and more money to be had by going abroad. I know he wasn't fleeing any persecution, and he wasn't fleeing arrest of something. I think, like other settlers, he wanted to settle America.
So how did the Goldsborough-Peel relationship begin?
Peel was in Maryland, traveling vastly, visiting a lot of different families. He was from Maryland himself, Charles Wilson Peel. And when he arrived, he called upon a friend who introduced him to Judge Robert of Marlborough. And I think that is where he met a plethora, at least 5 Goldsboroughs. He was bouncing around, trying to paint portraits. He knew they had money and they wanted to spend it. It's funny because he painted my ancestor house, Goldsborough. He did not paint him, which kills me to this day, but he painted my ancestors' 2 brothers. He painted Judge Robert Goldsborough's mother, and he painted a Mrs. William Goldsborough, but I'm actually not sure which painting that refers to.
So, and that's when his reputation is beginning to develop, or was his reputation just how long ago?
It was developed at that point, but certainly with patronage in Philadelphia and in Maryland, it really took off. I think the height is probably the 1770s to the 1790s. You've seen here the Cadwallader group in Philadelphia. He painted the Lloyd family. Maybe we all know Walk House. That portrait is located at the Literature Museum. He really used Tidewater landed gentry to just finish his career as an extraordinary portrait artist.
So the last plate that you showed, you said is the only one from a whole service. What tends to happen to them? Are they discovered in archaeological digs someday, or? Well, they're big services, right?
Yes.
Usually?
As you saw from another slide,
Yeah.
it's a service of 80 pieces sometimes. The families have many sons and daughters, and things get distributed in inheritance, and some of them are broken, some of them not maintained as well, and a lot of them sold for money. It's a shame because the value of a service is when you have several pieces together. I guess also I should say, I haven't personally found another dish of the Goldsborough Pennington plate, but research I've done only shows that plate photographed in several books, so it seems nobody else has found one either. It's a very good question.
That family that owned the plate originally from Charleston, South Carolina, because I think I've seen it at the beautiful home down there that is the name of that family that you had.
Yes, Manio.
That is Manio. Now, you were the owner of the silver service?
Oh yes, I am.
Who's the silversmith?
That's a very good question. My grandfather was stationed in Japan during the war, some years during the war, and then he went back. And he had this whole service. He had 50 goblets. He had 3 services of teapot and coffee services made for each of his daughters. And he had a Goldsborough sterling silver tray made. And according to my research with people in the silver field, apparently the samurai class needed to do something with their lives after the war. Well, that was a little bit before, but they became silversmiths. And so apparently the silver service was made in Japan by a silversmith, probably from the samurai family, which I hope that story is true, because that's what I've been told.
On this paper about this, your lecture here, it mentions Goldsboro branches of Myrtle Grove and Pleasant Valley plantations. I know where Myrtle Grove is. Where's Pleasant Valley?
Pleasant Valley is on Pleasant Valley Drive. No, but excuse me, it's near Easton. It's near Myrtle Grove.
It's north of the community center.
It's in the same.
On 622.
Oh, okay.
I have, so this lecture, I had a chapter on my ancestor house, Goldsboro, and this got too long, so I had to cut him, which was devastating. But I'll just tell you, recently there was a beautiful chest of drawers which came up for auction that came out of Pleasant Valley Plantation from the 18th century. And it sold for $10,000. And I tried to bid, but I just thought, well, I also need to retire. And Pleasant Valley is gorgeous. I have seen it. I was there in 2005. The owners, I believe it's the same couple who own it today. It's magnificent. I'm partial to it because it's my line of descent from the family, but it's a very beautiful, also federal style house with a magnificent grand staircase in the center of the home. I took this down off the wall of my apartment, but you've seen this a lot in the lecture, but this is the Goldsboro coat of arms. And so the family came from England, and they go back to the 13th century in Yorkshire, West Riding. There is a Goldsboro Hall located there, and a Goldsboro Village, and a Goldsboro Chapel. Before coming to England, they were in France, and they came with William the Conqueror. And when they arrived at the land, so that would be 1066, when William the Conqueror took over England from France, he gave them the land of Goldsboro, and so they changed their name to Goldsboro. So there are effigies, which are tombs of crusaders located at the Church of Goldsboro, in the village of Goldsboro, which depict the same coat of arms from the 14th and 15th centuries, carved on the shields of they're magnificent, of the crusaders. Plates this size in the service, there were 31, and I have managed to collect only 4. They are expensive, so I had to stop. But you can come up later and maybe look at these. They really are, it's extraordinary to think that a Goldsboro relative, either Charles, Governor Charles, or Judge Robert of Myrtle Grove, would send just like here, would send an engraving of the family arms to China, to Canton. And then a Goldsboro in Maryland also would have picked out this pattern based on pattern books available. So you pick out your pattern, you pick out, I don't think you can control all the various central motifs. Then the information is sent to Canton, and these services are made and sent back on the ships all the way back across the seas. Porcelain was usually stowed at the bottom of these large vessels because they could withstand any water damage that would come in. And so items like tea or silk would be stowed at the top of the ship. And so this service is dated to 1810, 1815. And I guess we saw here other armorials are very grand, with the arms being right in the center and all these different fabulous colors. But I kind of like this because each one has a different scene of courtly figures in a garden doing different things. So this here is a dessert plate, and this was a dessert. This was the dessert part of the service. And I guess I'm going to photo. So we can certainly view these. It's funny. My mother gave me. Oh, and I have the family tree. Okay. So this is the family tree, which we can all look at. How fun is that? I'll set it up over there, but you can imagine it's 3 feet by 5 feet wide. My mother gave me this when I was 12 years old, and I think the internet was just starting to be a thing. But really, she brought me to libraries to start doing research on who were these people, and I have to say, it's not perfect. This was probably done in the 1930s, and mistakes are always made, but on the whole, it's a fabulous document, which really helps because in the Goldsborough family, there are endless Roberts, endless Charleses, endless Williams. There's Nicholas Goldsborough VII. I mean, you know, so it helps to trace everything down. And this is my, all right, so. This is my great-grandmother. she's right here. But I'm free to take any other questions about anything.
What is the pattern that you recognize, auction houses and people like literature will have pattern books? Is there a name for the Goldsboro pattern?
Oh, yes. So with this is called the Goldsboro border. And it's
the name of it.
And it's
the pattern.
because I don't think scholars have seen this particular pattern used on any other service. But I wish. Oh, good. So galleries and auction houses would have labels also affixed to the back. And here we have a label here on the back of this one, which actually says the arms of Goldsboro of Maryland as reported in Crozier's General Armory, plate 528. So auction houses, to your point, they labels have been affixed over time to help say what it is. But also we have vast volumes of heraldry that you can look at the arms and try to navigate that way.
On your chart, the one figure at the top, that looks almost like the Episcopal Church. Is that swords or is that a cross?
That's a cross.
Cross.
Yes.
And they were Episcopal, or that Anglican church?
Oh, yes.
Does that symbolize that?
They were Protestants, yes, and it does.
Okay.
And the family crest. The crest sits at the top of the entire coat of arms. This is the shield, this is the mantling, this is the motto. Non sibi in Latin means not for thyself, which I think means do for others, if you translate that loosely. And so here's the cross. They were Protestant, they were a devout family. And the pelican up here is preening itself, but it preens itself so strongly that specks of blood descend from its breast. The blood is supposed to feed its little children below. I mean, children, its baby birds below. And that apparently is also another religious, has a religious background to it.
Chicks are called.
Chicks. I'm sorry. I came from New York to Baltimore to Annapolis to here, and I'm about to pass away.
You have, looks like little rats here with red hair or something. You put that clue what they are?
Oh, in here?
Top and bottom.
Yeah. Look at the bottom. Look at the bottom. See the little red animals with red behind?
Oh, yes. That is those are two. Well, all right. Those are two horses but they have flags coming behind them. But
Down
it's
below that.
oh, below.
The ferry. That.
Yeah.
Oh, those are sorry. I think I'm right. Those are actually dolphins, but not a dolphin in the traditional sense. Those are fish-like animals that you see used in the Baroque period and Rococo periods in France and sometimes in America. I wonder if I can zoom in. Oh. This one's not as good. Can you see the eye and the scales and how the tail curves into a fish's tail up here? That's what that is. This portrait was very interesting because it was housed in a private collection in Philadelphia, and my stepmother happened to know a curator at the Philadelphia Museum of Art who was slowly able to accession this painting from that family into the museum. And so that picture came from where I'm standing in front of it. I'm standing with the family who owned it. And the painting was coming into the collection of such a great museum, and this curator really needed help with Goldsboro history, determining who owned it and who the sitters were. And I worked with her for about a year, back and forth, and it was an amazing experience. And so now today, all of you, if you're in Philadelphia, please go to the Philadelphia Museum of Art and have a look at this painting. It is magnificent.
Thank you so much.